distant skies, firefight calls. The stakes are high, on the flame heroes and spies. Control fire, where strategy lies. Hear the tales, fierce and deep. Victors roar, defeated weep. We blaze a way, we don't hold back. Control fire, ready to attack.
Welcome to Control Fire, your monthly musings on Mantic's Firefight. I'm joined by Sam.
Hello.
And Luke.
Hello.
Only 4 days ago, I ran a 1,250 point tournament. You may have heard me mention on this podcast before, or alternatively, you saw me spamming the living daylights out of Firefight fanatics or on Dead Zone Firefight or Warpath Australia Facebook pages. We just thought it might be interesting for you to hear the thoughts of Luke and Sam on how they made their choices on their factions to play, brief rundown on their lists and why they chose the units that they did and how they performed during the day.
And I'm very excited to unpack all that. I'm also very excited because hot on the heels of the surprise release of the Marauder Salvage Engineers last month, we've had 4 new Matsudan units arrive for the Asterians. So just like last month, I will take a few minutes at the start to unpack all of these new units. Before we jump into that, shall we do From the Forge?
So for me, I'm getting pretty close now to at least finishing my Firefight version of the Night Stalkers. In the meantime, I've actually got the rest of the units that I need to convert the other units I want to have in the Night Stalker Kings of War list that I have. So I have all the models, more than half the models are painted, which is all the Scarecrows and Spectres. And I just basically have my Reapers and Butchers and a few other bits and pieces, as well as a Void Lurker to go, and that's great. So
good on you for grinding out the chaffy bits of your painting first. It's the thing I find the hardest is you just want to get to the exciting bits, and I normally intersperse those in as little rewards for I have painted 30 Plague Zombies, now I get to do a Plague Lord. That kind of thing. So good on you for persevering with those hordes.
I need to do the hordes first. I have to keep the pretty stuff at the top of the list there because my motivation, I've got to get there, I've got to do this bit first.
How about you, Luke?
Don't mind painting the troops. For me, it's the assembly. Once I've got the whole army assembled and primed, I can smash it out. But sticking little bits of plastic together. That's why I like 3D printing so much, particularly now with the Vault, right? Even things that come in multi-parts in the print, I just assemble them in Blender and export them as a single STL and print them in one piece so I don't have to do any assembly. It's great. Speaking of the Vault, since I played both Firefight and Kings of War at FoolCon, I haven't, the last few weeks been doing a bit of hobby for those to get them ready. But now that I'm post that, I'm cooking up a couple of secret projects for both systems. Being a little bit tight-lipped about what they are. They're using a bunch of the awesome new plastic Mantic brews, particularly for Kings of War. I've also got some Vault sculpts and kit bashes going on there to supplement those forces, so I'm excited to get those on the table.
I have never been more curious as to what it is you're actually doing now.
Well, you'll have to be curious for a while longer.
For myself, I mentioned in previous episodes that I had put my GCPS to one side in order to get my Asterians ready for FoolCon, and I did. And I am now so over painting gemstones and all the little tonings and all the little highlight dots in order to make it look like the gemstones are shining. I am now done with those and I am back to just smashing out hordes of GCPS infantry.
Well, they do look excellent, and there were some comments on the posts online about how good the Asterians look, so you've done a good job.
You.
Yeah.
I just know that each of those infantry have a minimum of 3 gemstones each on their back. Done with those now. Now it's GCPS. Except there's some very exciting new Asterian stuff that's just appeared in the Vault. So just like I was lamenting having to put my GCPS to the side because I was on a roll in order to get Asterians painted for FoolCon, I'm now getting into my GCPS and new Asterians have landed. Let's chat on them. There are 4 new units, as I mentioned, which have just appeared in the Vault, and with accompanying stat lines in the Asterian beta rules in the companion. So that means these are probably in a state of flux for the rules committee. They're putting the rules out there so that we get a chance to play with them, see if they sit about right. So these are firmly in beta, but get them on the table and get the feedback in. I'm sure the RC wants to know just how they're doing. So the first unit is the Matsuyamori. These are the crocodile bloodhounds that the Matsudan send into battle. They are a 40-point troop. They are a speed 714 unit, only armor 4, which is a bit of a downside to them, and assault 5 with 2D in assault. That's okay. The major things for them are their keywords because they have auxiliary and beast. so they're not unlocking for you and they're not scoring your objectives in HVAs. They do have Frenzy 2 and Sure-Footed to give them a little bit of a boost in combat with Evade as their assault reaction keyword. What are our thoughts on the Matsuya Mori Bloodhounds?
They can't score objectives, but they have unit strength 2 for such a cheap unit as well. That's right. That's a lot to throw into something like a lockdown or into area control scenarios as well. That's, unit strength 2 on a 40-point minimum cost unit is pretty nice.
Absolutely. I mean, because they're armor 4, they may not be surviving the battle, but if you can tuck them out of the way when no one's shooting at them, they can absolutely be dropping unit strength 2 for scoring.
Yeah, that's the first thing I was really surprised at seeing for a 40-point unit to have a unit strength of 2. That's what screamed at me when I read that stat line.
I mean, it makes sense, I guess, as well, because things like the Plague Zombies as well, they're a 45-point unit off the top of my head for 10 of them. They're also unit strength 2, and they're actually unlocking, whereas these are auxiliary.
Yeah, there is 10 of them, though. But these guys, they're a little bit faster. 2 dice in melee as well is quite nice. On 5s with Sure-Footed and Frenzy 2. So they actually, without AP, fine, they still slap pretty hard for that cost of a unit. Mm-hmm. And, with the unit strength 2 as well to add to something like Lockdown, they're pretty good to send to punch something off an objective and then add unit strength where needed after that as well. I
kind of see them as a torpedo unit that you're basically paying 40 points for a fire and forget unit that is almost certainly not going to survive the game, but it can knock a light unit off an objective. It can put some damage or provoke an assault reaction on a unit, which means that unit might be activated when the opponent didn't want it to be. With 714, they can get somewhere, and with Sure-Footed, they're not worried about obstacles or terrain on the way.
It's probably a 1 or none unit, to be honest, because for 15 more points, you're getting duelist marionettes.
Yes.
Which can shoot 18 inches as well as, assault reasonably close. Not quite as fast, it doesn't have the Sure-Footed, but it's still got the 2 dice on assault. So.
And they unlock and can score.
So. And they're constructs that can't be pinned. They've got a lot of benefits. 15 points if you're really suffering. But the Matsuya Mori, maybe 1 or 2. Max 2. Maybe 1.
No, I mean, I think they're a great unit for... I have 40 points left after my build, and this is a unit that does not require unlocks and has a roll.
Yes.
All right, let's roll on to the next one, which is the Matsudan Heavy Assault Team. So this is a specialist option. It's basically a 15-point upgrade on the Matsudan Combat Team, which is an unlocking troop choice. This is the specialist version of it. For that 15 points, you gain Defensible, Shield 3, and Unflinching. It does say for the Firefight version of this that it starts with Enashi. The Dead Zone version of this mentioned that it's actually Deashi that you're starting with, which is the Sword and Shield version, and then you can upgrade to the Inashi version, which comes with a Light Blade and Shield. The Light Blade and Shield takes them to 3D AP2 Vicious, otherwise they're 3D AP1 each. But aside from that, they're your normal Matsudan, Defense 6, Resilient 1, and 2 hit points each. What are your thoughts on the Matsudan Heavy Assault Team?
Defensible, Shield 3, they look good. I mean, I'm used to Defensible from playing Enforcers, and I know how good that is, and Shield's always a pain in the backside to deal with, so... Especially when you're talking about assaults and you're just ignoring then you can turn something from a draw into a win easy by absorbing 3 hits with a shield. A pretty solid unit, I think.
I agree. I mean, I do think Defensible with Countercharge is not as strong as some other defensible units. Countercharge is a relatively weak charge reaction. It means that they can, say, sprint forward and then immediately Overwatch for free. Gets them onto an objective and it's harder to push them off.
Yeah, the Shield 3, they don't have a shield generator, but if you've got an Overseer, they don't care because the OC is just going to ping a shield back anyway. I think you'd always want to play the Light Blade. It's a 4-point upgrade, which gains you 1 AP and Vicious. I think for the cost of this unit, it's a very small price to pay for that sort of, reliability upgrade of putting wounds on things. They do have the option of the drone for the medic self. I think on combat-only units, that's a really good upgrade just because, sometimes you're just moving and not, you can't shoot. So would I move 12 and maybe in a slightly better position, or do I go 6 and heal a wound back? On a resilient shield unit that's hard to put wounds on in the first place, having that extra bit of medic maybe is a bit of a pain in the butt for your opponent. and that's always fun.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because I've always thought of the Matsudan drones having greater utility on the shooting versions, because then they can stand still, shoot, and heal back a wound. But I guess you're sacrificing steady aim if you're doing that.
Yeah, exactly. If you're going for a shooting unit, almost always, like how often do you get clear shots? Like almost never, right? It may as well have been flipped around so that normal shooting is what it is, and then if you get a clear shot, you get a bonus because you're always taking a negative.
I think the medic self is also just useful to boost them to Resilient 2.
Yeah.
Because then they are Shield 3, Armor 6, Resilient 2. Oh, and with built-in medic if you need it. At 2 hit points each, that becomes a very difficult unit to shift. We're looking more resilient now than Reanimation Division, right?
Yeah, and you can even put a minimum unit with a medic on an objective. Just sit there and say, look, you can try and put wounds on me, but I'm gonna sit here for a long time and heal back whatever you do.
So 80 points gets you 3. You mentioned the light blade's a good upgrade. Would you just put it on the leader, or would you be looking to upgrade multiple models with the light blade?
Well, it depends. If I was going a minimum unit to sit on an objective and say, well, I've got counter charge, you're going to struggle to shoot me off and you're going to struggle to punch me off as well, then I probably wouldn't. But if I'm intending to get stuck in, probably without a medic, then I would go the light blades for sure.
Having the shield without shield generator, like I said, it means you're relying on the Overseer in order to get your shields back, or the Energize order as well, which is the spend 2, get 3 shields back. And so that gets it up quite quickly. And of course, if you are theming your Asterian list more towards Matsudan, you may not have too many of these other shield units begging for that Energize order. It can go on these guys very easily.
Yeah, it's perfect for a Matsudan theme list, obviously. Yeah.
I think these guys are very good. I think they should definitely see play. They're just so tough. Shield 3, 2 hit points, Armor 6, Resilient 1 or 2. Can go to Resilient 3 if you get your Toshiyori in range.
Nearly as tough as Forge Brothers.
I wouldn't go that far. I should have mentioned the Asterians get 4 new units, but they're 4 new assault units, which is not something you normally associate with Asterians. The third unit we can talk about is the Matsudan Assault Grav Bike. So the Matsudan Assault Grav Bike is an alternate version of the regular Matsudan Grav Bike. So it has similar stats. It's 915 for its speed. It loses its shooting, but it goes to Assault 4, which is actually, I think, outside of Matsudan characters, the only time we've seen Assault 4 on a Matsudan unit. So just like the original Grav Bikes, they have Anti-Grav and Bulky, Designation Honorable and Headstrong, Resilient 1. These guys also have Shield 3 and Shield Generator, and they're carrying Ion Lancers, which are 3D AP3 Elite. That means with that Assault 4 and Anti-Grav, they're very seldom going to get hindered charges. This is 3 attacks, most of the time on 3s, re-rolling 1s AP3. For 90 points for the unit of 2 and 40 points for each extra model, what do we reckon?
They've also got Headstrong, right? So it's basically like having a Mutant Rat Fiend for cheaper in a specialist slot. The mini unit of 2 has 6 dice AP3 on 4s with Elite. That's pretty good. Plus they've got the shield generator, which is an August 2 regen. I would be running these.
Yeah, I think they're excellent.
Yeah.
Yep. Can't disagree. Start off with the base unit of equivalent to 9 hit points because you've got the shield 3 on a super fast unit.
Well, that's not strictly true because shield mitigates hits, not wounds.
Then you got shield gen over the course of a game if they survive.
Okay,
I guess it's probably similar.
So you're looking at about 9 wounds on the 915 platform with 3 dice each and AP3 in Elite. Yeah, it's a solid unit really. It's just going to be scary on the table seeing Asterians getting all this assault type options in it that didn't really have before. Weren't exactly a poor faction to start with.
They did have some good assault options like Kalishi and so on, but they're now starting to get some alternate, also quite good assault options.
Punchy and tough. One thing to remember with these, if you go the unit of 2, they can never be broken, but they also can't score once one of them dies.
They drop to unit strength 0. They would still have a
so they can still hold an objective, but they can't contest it if someone else is.
Yeah.
They can't add unit strength to a circle. So yes, they can still hold objectives in the absence of anyone else.
I think this unit is excellent. I've already printed some. I'm very keen to get them on the table. All right, and our final unit we get to talk about is the Osansho Predator, which is a big lizard on a 60mm base, clad in Matsudan-style armor. It is speed 714, so again, we're seeing quite a few of these faster units. It's Assault 4, which is not bad. Armor 5, so a little bit lighter than some of the others we've seen, and only 3 hit points. It is Beast, so can't score. Bulky, can't be transported. Frenzy 2, and Unflinching. It has 5D AP1 attacks in melee and a 2D AP1 It Burns Spit weapon. So it is 50 points for 1. The option to also take an additional 1 for an extra 50 points. What are our thoughts on the Osansho Predator?
I would never make space for this unit in my specialist slot if there was something else I wanted to take. However, if I had a spare unlock, and especially if I had an awkward number of points or really wanted an extra drop, one of these for 50 is pretty nice, I think. Obviously competing directly with the Marionette Phantom at the same price point, same style of unit, but this one can't score because it's Beast.
Yep.
And actually the Phantom isn't even bulky, so it technically can go in a building.
Can technically go in a building and can be transported.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense for the Cairo, right? Because
Maybe that's an oversight. I don't know. But it's competing with the Marionette. I think it assaults quite well, 5 dice for a 50-point unit on 4s is quite nice. And that little pip of speed, particularly if you're looking at a Matsudan themed list, I think it's totally fine as an extra drop. It would be nice if it wasn't Beast, I think, but it kind of makes sense to be Beast given the fact that it's a dinosaur.
Yeah. I mean,
You know.
I don't actually mind Beast on it, just because in Asterians, you're not normally having to count your scoring drops quite so closely as in some other lists. You're not normally overloading on vehicles or other beasts, right? So,
and I think you're not tending to take too much It Burns in the list anyway. So just having that source of force and nerve check on something like Stalkers that are going to fail it because they're probably not near and inspiring anyway, right? That's a pretty cool little trick to add to the bag.
I think the only other It Burns weapon in the Asterian list is the Phlogister, carried by the Marionette units. How often do you see them?
0.
Yeah, correct. Mike, what do you reckon of the Predator?
Great model.
It is an awesome
yes.
model.
It's really dope. I would run them just to run the dinosaur.
Yeah.
But the same thing as what Luke was saying. I've been contemplating on whether or not I would take a Phantom or I'd take the Predator. I think it's similar items, and me being me, it'd probably be whether or not I'm taking a Matsudan Force or I'm taking a Marionette and Cypher Force on what I'd be choosing between those two. The other thing too is the Predator does have a much bigger butt than the Phantoms do. Can potentially make it harder to hide, but I'm not sure. I think Luke also hit the nail on the head, and the fact is there's so many great specialist options now. I'm not sure I would squeeze either of those two things into a list.
And the butt is bigger, actually, worth noting, only in surface area, not in composition, because it has 1 less hit point and 2 less armor than the Marionette Phantom as well. So it is faster, a little bit punchier in melee, but it dies a lot easier as well.
Yeah, I mean, armor 5 and 3 hit points means that's just 3 marionettes. It's sitting alongside what you would expect to be Matsudan, which are normally armor 6, resilient 1. It does look a little bit flimsy alongside it.
But it'll see play because it's a dinosaur.
Oh, I think it is an awesome model, and I would expect to see it on. I think it's interesting you're comparing it against the Phantom at the 50-point version. In my head, I'm comparing the 100-point version, the two Osansho Predator together, in order to give out 10D AP1 attacks with Frenzy 2. That sounds good. But for mine, it's not competing against the Marionette Phantom. It's competing against Kalishi. Kalishi are also a 714 charge. They also hit on 3s. 90 points of Kalishi gets you 15 attacks instead of 10. They also have stealthy, so give them a little bit of extra durability on the way in. They can score, they can be transported, and they unlock. So for 10 points less, you actually get a much better unit in a troop slot. I don't know if it's terribly fair to compare against Kalishi, just because Kalishi are a top-tier assault unit, right? But you have to, because they're in the same list. I would still run the Osansho Predator if I was doing a Matsudan theme list because cool. But at 100 points...
See, for me, at 100 points, I'm starting to look towards the assault grab bikes that have just arrived at the same time.
100%.
So, I know you're talking about the Kalishi, but to me, I would go, nah, sorry, it's competing with the grab bikes, even if you can take 2.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the Asterian Predator is statted correctly. It has the correct rules. I just think where it sits right now is just a bit too expensive for what it brings. If the two of them came in at 80, maybe if it was 40-40 or even 40-35 for the second one, I could see it being a bit more viable. It's just a bit too expensive now, I think.
Yeah, I think 75 or 80 for 2 feels fine.
But beautiful models in the Matsudan. I mean, surely we can't be too far away now from a Matsudan army. They've got almost a complete roster now.
Well, nearly half the Asterian army is Matsudan, so maybe.
And also the Asterian list now is
Huge. It's
in
enormous.
terms of its available options. So
Yes.
I predict a schism in the future. Shall we roll on to talking about the event we've just been to?
So I might just go through the first part, I guess, which is the scenarios that I chose, and I guess the reason why I chose them. The tournament's 1,250 points. We've been running 1,250 points for a little while here. I have been interested in trying to get that up to a higher point value, but with the time limit within this particular venue on the day that it was being run, I decided to stay with 1,250 points to try to make sure we fit it in. Mm-hmm. And the first scenario I chose was the controlled advance scenario. The main reason for that is, in my mind, that's one of the gun-lined scenarios where if someone does want to take a gun line, it sort of suits them and what they need to do, even though they do need to move forward a little bit to try and claim some of the objectives, but it suits that particular type of list. The next one is extraction, which is completely opposite to that because you need to try to get into the middle of the board as soon as you possibly can. So that tends to suit those sort of assaulty type armies or quick armies that want to get somewhere really quick. And the last one, I always try to have at least one of these type of scenarios in where vehicles and beasts and so forth still have an opportunity to score. So this particular one was lockdown, but you've also got taken hold and obviously control also work the same. So the three scenarios were to work in those areas. So controlled advanced, extraction and lockdown were the three scenarios. And that was the main reason why I chose them. And typically I always try to choose very similar scenarios that have those similar type of objectives in when I'm working out a tournament.
It was a good mix. I really enjoyed playing them.
So what I would like to do is just get the two gentlemen to go through why they chose their particular faction and just a quick rundown on their list and why those units were chosen in those particular lists.
You've heard me talk about my Veer-myn for probably months now. So, and I do somewhat regret not taking them down to Clash of Protocols. So, it was high time they hit the table. I also knew there'd be a few Marauders players at this event. I didn't predict so many Veer-myn, so I thought this would be perfect. It'll help balance the field. But, hilariously, it turned out there was 2 other Veer-myn players for a total of 3.
Anyway. A quarter of the field was rats?
Yeah. So, but at least a third of the field wasn't Marauders. So that's always a win. I did predict that I would probably do worse with them than my Marauders, which, spoiler alert, was untrue. But I just wanted to play the rats, so I played the rats. Sam?
For me, we'll have heard it was a bit of a painting challenge for me. My Asterians have been sitting in cases and on dusty shelves for a little bit too long. I used this tournament as some impetus in order to get that army painted, and very happy to have done so. The other reason I picked Asterians is I've taken Maison Labs to the last 2 tournaments, FoolCon and Clash, and Asterians are a very different playstyle to that faction.
Did you want to just quickly run through your list and the reason why you made the choices, Luke?
I think in this game in particular, I like every unit to have at least 2 jobs. So for commanders, that's easy because they inspire and they provide command dice and orders, which is why I ran 2 solo progenitors with toxic gas. They inspire, they give cover and stealthy to, on average, 1.5 units a turn. Or you can blow up a tank with a gas launcher instead, which we'll get to soon, because that's a lot of fun. And the Tangle Tunneler was the other commander for reasons that, really, I hope don't need to be explained, because that is a powerhouse unit and plugs a lot of holes in the list.
And drills a lot of holes.
Drills a lot of holes in enemies. I did get into combat with a Tangle Tunneler at one point in the tournament as well, so that was awesome. Yeah, my opponent went, all right, I attack you, and then I went, I attack back, and this guy's actually pretty good. This is his attacks, and he goes, oh, yeah, that is pretty good. So my troops are also pretty easy to explain. Their jobs are minimum 2 jobs, unlock. And from there, the rest of the list with the troops, it's mostly just to exist. That is a job. So I had 2 big units of crawlers for bodies and to hold objectives while taking fire. So they can peel off a lot of wounds and still sort of exist. Sometimes stick even when they're broken and mostly not. There was a big stalker unit, which is basically to do the same, but also provides that bit more of a melee punch. And then 2 malignant units with heavy ray guns. I like them because they have a couple of great benefits over the crawlers. That's that they shoot better and that there's less of them to paint. And the trade-off to that is being bodies. So you get about half as many hit points for the same number of points. They shoot on 5s with 2 dice AP1.
That is elite rats.
Which, that is elite for rats. Not much. The only things that shoot better than 5s is it burns. Right? Whereas, crawlers shoot on 6s, which is just atrocious. You feel it every time you shoot with them. You think, I'm rolling a bucket of dice and look at that, I got 1 wound. Great. Sometimes none. It's awful.
Can I interest you in playing Plague?
I'll look forward to that when I'm playing on hard surface.
Yeah. So Malignity just add that little bit of extra, long range shooting, which is nice. No trademark on their guns though. That's important because there's one trademark order which they just can't use. So that's got to go to someone else. So the specialists, I only had 2. So I went with a unit of 2 Nightmares with heavy chemthroid in a tunneler. You'll see a very good example of why that unit exists in the list later. And a unit of 3 Night Terrors with chems because that's a ridiculously good unit.
It is.
And then 2 Shield Tunnelers, both with super heavy ray gun for some ranged anti-tank support and the ridiculous shield bubble. It's a pretty shooty list, particularly for rats that have a lot of good combat options. I don't have many of them. I am mostly a shooty list with a little bit of melee to back it up. But what it does have is a massive bag of tricks that annoys my opponents. I think Veer-myn can be one of the more tricksy factions, and I just, went all in on the tricksiness.
If you go back and listen to our list building episode, you'll have a pretty good insight into my overall process for list building. For this one, I started with a mobile contingent, so that is a Cypher Prime unit with 2 wardens in an entourage, a full-strength warden unit with a shield drone, and mount the 2 of them in a Kyra transporter. There's also a flexible small unit of Sky Razors who move their unit strength to somewhere 18 inches where I particularly need it, and can also glide 12 and put out 6 shots on 3s. It's not terrible. I also have a midfield contingent, which is a full-strength Cypher unit with a force rifle and a shield drone. There is a Spectre Assassin as well, who's just sort of flitting around, putting out 18-inch 4 dice AP3 anti-tank shots, just to keep some vehicles pretty honest. There's also 2 small marionette units with sniper rifles who are purely there for putting an extra 2 unit strength on the board and also being able to walk onto very lightly contested objectives. And a backfield contingent, which contains an overseer with a Shuvatar and no friends. He's there to be another thumb, which can contest an objective for me, but mostly just to carry a green and an orange dice and to pump out his shield boost. In the backfield with him are 2 weapon platforms, one with double fission beamer and one with double plasma vortex. So for drilling tanks, or for drilling infantry and aircraft if anyone happens to bring them. Also in the backfield is a Chroma with super heavy fission beamer to reach out at 36 inches and nail any tanks which I can see. What does the list lack? Assault strength. I hadn't actually tested this list before bringing it. I've tested variants at 1500 points, but I normally managed to put some sort of assault in there at that point. I really did feel the assault lack in this tournament. I really needed to kill everything before it reached me. When I did, it was okay. When I didn't, I'll come to that.
Okay, we might get into the particular rounds. So round 1, as we mentioned, was controlled advance. If you guys maybe give a brief description of the table, I guess, who you were playing or what faction you were playing against, and then have a talk about why you placed your units, potentially why you did, and how did this scenario pan out for you.
Well, my first opponent was Stu from Port Macquarie. Great guy, as all my opponents were, but Stu really sort of adds to the event, I think, with his presence. So it was great having him there. Drove up with Hasto from Port Macquarie, and they both played in this event, which was great. He was playing Forge Fathers. I'll be honest, I didn't read anyone's list before this event. So I didn't have a whole lot of time before these games to digest what I really was afraid of, because I was kind of doing it in the moment. What scared me the most about Stu's list, though, was the drop troops. We were playing controlled advance. I knew I'd have flimsy units on my back objectives, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to drop that unit down behind me and he's going to try and push me off an objective. So I was kind of afraid for my backline. The terrain on this, on our table, was fairly evenly spread, but both of us had blocking or tall terrain sort of just in or just in front of our deployment zones. So I hid both my backfield tokens directly behind terrain because I knew I'd have flimsy units on them, and Stu kind of mostly hid them. He put them in places where I wouldn't get lots of good firing lines, but that maybe his units holding them could still contribute to the fight, which was a really good call on his part. So I could tell that all I pretty much had to do was take out his small Brocker units, and he wouldn't be able to claim the central objectives without moving things forward from his backline and really putting him, sort of in that catch-22 situation. It was fairly easy to do that. With hit burns, even with cover, it didn't really matter. And then my Tangle Tunneler with its psychic just shot straight through a building. It doesn't care. So in pretty short order, those Brocker units was gone, and it kind of played out exactly sort of how I thought it was going to. And it was a bit of an uphill battle for Stu from there. Like, he clearly knew what he was doing and he knew his army and that sort of thing, but I just managed to pinpoint those couple of things that I needed to do to make it nearly impossible for him to win the game, no matter how well he played for the rest of it. I did manage to deal with the drop troops that came down. They came down at the end of a turn. I think I put some wounds on them before they could do anything. They came down, they shot. They couldn't take off a unit or anything. I managed to put some wounds back on them. And then before they came in, I had another lot of shooting at them. So I think they came in with two of them left. Didn't deal enough to wipe the unit out, and I could sort of take them out from there. So that was unfortunate for him, but great for me. My Night Terrors also burrowed, but I chose not to bring them up behind his lines. I chose to use them as sort of screening cover and bring them into a more advantageous position in front of him. And that's the last time I burrowed them. I think I deployed them on the field, perhaps, in the remaining two games. I think the standouts in this game for me from my list, it's probably going to be a trend, but it's the Shield Tunnelers and the Progenitors. So both of which punch well above their weight in terms of keeping things alive. The Shields obviously with the Shield Bubble, and then the Armor 8 heavy armor on themselves with the Shield Tunnelers to be survivable, and the Progenitors just being able to dish out so much stealthy and cover. And the real key with this list, because you've got an order, Pestilent Haze, you've got the two orders from the Progenitors and their smokes, all of which say until the unit next activates. So it's really it's not about timing, going necessarily first with them to give stealthy and cover for until you activate. It's about understanding what my activation order is well in advance of doing it and being able to time, do I need the smoke and stealthy, do I need the smoke now for this turn, or do I need it after they activate to last me until next turn? So it's all about the timing with those. 5 sources, though, of cover and stealthy against a shooty army like the Forge Fathers once you kill the Brockers is just, incredible.
So my first opponent was Alexei and some bright red Marauders. My Asterians are also in scarlet and black, so the battlefield ended up looking quite garish, I think. So the last time Alexei and I faced off was on the top table final round at SpringCon, and that was a very, very tight game. So my first takeaway from Alexei's list was the volume of heavy armor and durability. So twin range stunt bots, a full unit of grunt bots, and twin Ripper Warlords with Rainmaker retinues. So the list was really bringing a lot of metal to the table. In terms of the way we set up, we both screened our backfield objectives from long-range fire behind some forest, so kind of similar to how you were doing. I stacked one flank with only a single marionette to contest my far right objective, which I knew wouldn't last long against a Ripper Warlord, and it didn't. It managed to score for a turn, and that was okay. So my center had the mobile contingent, except I had the Overseer in there instead of the Cypher Prime. I only realized after the game a major opportunity here, because the center of the board was dominated by a hill, and that's what was the major line of sight blocker. I could have moved my Kyra forward across all of that straight 18 inches. There was very little in the way of unit obstruction there, to then dismount the Wardens 6 inches and then fire close-range knockback shots into one of the backfield objectives who were just cowering behind that forest and cleared them off. I didn't even clock it at the time. My focus was entirely on, I need to get those Wardens onto a central objective. And I really should have been thinking, the Kyra gives me an 18-inch sprint and then a 6-inch deploy and then a 6-inch knockback shooting. I can choose to use power diverters if I need to extend that knockback range. I was kicking myself because that would have entirely swung the game, but you only think about these things after, right?
You clearly didn't play Marauders before Command Protocols, right? Because that was all about how do I get my guys into your backfield as quickly as possible.
Although charging, right? Whereas this would have been, Anyway, I absolutely should have lost this game. and it is purely due to a tragic technical error on Alexei's behalf that it came out as a draw. So Alexei played very well and tight, zoning me out of the remaining objectives in turn 3, so parking a mule over on the far left-hand one, which I then needed to kill in order to go in and claim. Alexei also used a stunt bot to obstruct my claiming another objective on a flank in the center. However, because you can't end a move within 1 inch of a friendly unit, even though Alexei had a Ripper Warlord who had the range to move onto an objective, the unit was accidentally prevented from moving onto it because it would have approached within 1 inch of the stunt bot. So the stunt bot had not only obstructed me from claiming it, it also obstructed the Ripper Warlord from claiming it as well. And of course, the stunt bot couldn't claim it, it's a vehicle. So in all honesty, Alexei absolutely should have won this game. I was very lucky for it to be a draw. So, I mean, I know we did an episode a couple of months ago, which was Gotchas, Quirks, and Oft Overlooked Rules. And I do think the friendly units can move through each other, but must end their move 1 inch away. It's sometimes an overlooked rule. Sometimes you do see units compacted together closer than 1 inch, and technically they should be ending their movement 1 inch away. Even though the stunt bot was absolutely within the rules to walk on and stand on top of that objective, and even left a few mils at the back, because the Ripper Warlord unit can't then end its move within 1 inch of that stunt bot, it then wasn't able to claim. I will say, to Alexei's credit, Alexei handled it so well, and there was no rage towards me. It was purely rage towards themselves at having made a technical error.
Yeah, Alexei beat me in our practice game in the week lead up as well with that list. Strong list, knew how to play it.
Yeah, it was a very tight game.
I'm glad that you two people drew each other, so I didn't have to face either of you, and I could ride the wave away from that kind of competition. So yeah, thanks very much to both of you.
You're most welcome.
So that was Controlled Advance. As I said, it was pretty even field at that point in time, and so we moved into the Extraction game. How did Extraction go for you, Luke?
It went pretty well. My second opponent in Extraction was Tim, local fella. I've known him for years, great guy, good friend, and he was playing GCPS. Now, this is pretty funny because Tim has been building his force for a while, but he'd only played one game going into this event, and that was against me, like a week before the event, just so he could have a game and get the kinks out and sort of make sure he understood the system. Then his first opponent that he ended up beating was Veer-myn. So he won that, and I was like, you're welcome for the practice against the rats. So that was all fun and games until the dread set in at the pairing back with me. So the issue here is that, through the practice game where I'm trying to help him along and give him tips to beating me, both of us were stumped and scratching our head about how he would win the game, because my force is very much a shooty force that is very anti-shooting, and he has GCPS, which is, with one exception, a very shooty army. So it's just the perfect matchup for me and the worst possible matchup for Tim. So it was a bad matchup, and it did not, unfortunately, get any better. In Tim's list, I had two major concerns. So there's his two veterans, both with grenade launchers, because they shoot really well, and those grenade launchers do really bad things to my army. Mm-hmm. Blast happens before shields, so I really didn't want to have to waste a bunch of shields on his blast weapons, as well as all the small arms fires coming at me. Managing my shields was a big problem and priority. The other one was the right troops and the mule. The mule was my number one priority, followed by avoiding or dealing with the veterans. I also wanted to snag an early lead, which I could do, and Tim couldn't snag an early lead as long as I neutralized or zoned out that mule. So, spoiler alert, I didn't quite kill the mule on turn 1, but I did scare him into dropping the troops out early, so then they weren't so much of a concern for me getting in my face and, knock back and all that sort of other painful things that I don't want them doing. I did decide not to care about the two Wolverine tanks. There wasn't much chance of killing them, just aim to pin them so they couldn't steady aim and take out my things that were in cover and stealthy and that sort of thing, so I could just weather those shots a little bit more. I did get one, though. We'll get to how I managed that in a moment. So this table had a few buildings, so I decided to keep feeding troops into the center one on my side so they could get in there, get up some good quality shots, and then draw a lot of fire. And that worked really well. I did secure an HVA on turn 1 with one of my MVPs. This HVA was in a forest in the middle of the table, obviously. So I put the tunneler with my two nightmares directly opposite opposite it. So I could late in the turn move the tunneler forward and then dismount the nightmares, move forward 6, claim the objective on turn 1 as I think it was my last activation. You know, they did have some cover, but they wouldn't probably get melted with fire. And I finished activating first. So my first activation next turn was to shoot their It Burns weapons, because they're the heavy chemthrower ones, at a unit, take a bunch of wounds off because It Burns AP1 toxic is pretty dope, and then move backwards in the forest to be out of the 3-inch edge of the forest, and then thus
I believe we were talking about this just last episode, right?
We were. It was viable to go behind the forest, but that would have actually put me just in sight for steady aims from tanks and other things that I didn't want shooting. So in the forest was actually better in this case because that shut down those firing lines. In subsequent turns, they then moved out. Funnily enough, that mule that I couldn't quite kill ended up taking them out with a lucky shot. Well, unlucky, just some YOLO yeet shots across the field. Not lucky. It was well planned, but on turn 5. So they did die and drop their token on turn 5, but they held it from turn 1 all the way through turn 4, scoring, and then finally died on 5. So I managed to secure the other 2 tokens on turn 2 and run away. The other MVP in this game was oddly shaped like a progenitor. So that Wolverine that I got down to 1 hit point by trying to pin it to stop the steady aims, got down to 1 hit point left. So this little mad lad threw a single 5+ toxic smoke shot at it, which managed to hit, blasted up to 5 hits. One of them rolled an 8 and passed the heavy armor roll, killing the tank. So I was very excited. I may have yelled out some profanities in my excitement that turned a few heads and did make Tim laugh. So that was all great and fun and games. But that was amazing on that little 60-point progenitor's part. So yeah, nothing really underperformed in this game. Everything pretty much did what I expected of it, which I guess is the theme for the day, right? Everything that I had, you obviously get some good rolls, some bad rolls, but everything performed exactly what I expected of it. There's no, while there might be some MVPs here and there was never really any, whatever the opposite of an MVP is.
Least valuable player?
Least valuable.
LVPs.
There were no LVPs.
I think my Spectra Assassin ended up being my LVP. Except in my last game, the Spectra did do something, but it always just seemed...
Meh.
It always was a bit meh, yeah. All right, but in my second game, I was playing against Mark and his Forge Fathers. So Mark is a great bloke to play against. All my opponents were on the day, which is awesome. We've played before. His skill in playing his Forge Fathers has really come along in leaps and bounds. I thought his list looked really well crafted for scenario play. There was a Drakkar in there for moving forces around, and Hammer Fists, you'll be happy to hear, Mike, to get exactly where they need to be. And Mark played it beautifully. The Hammer Fists, because this was extraction, didn't aerial drop. They scouted forward in order to get themselves right up by the center objective. The first activation then was claiming that objective. The Brockers were in the Drakkar. They scooped round in the Drakkar, hopped out, claimed my right flank objective, and then a Brocker Chieftain stepped round and put a Resilient 2 bubble on them. In Mark's first 4 activations, he'd claimed 2 of the HVAs that are on the table and turned the Brockers into a relatively resilient force. I'm Asterians, and I got outsped and outmaneuvered by Forge Fathers. It was a very interesting experience. I mean, my plan had been to have the Kira glide up and have some Wardens drop out to claim 1 and have the Prime drop out on the other side, because this thing is, 8 inches wide on a Kyra, right? You can really split your forces pretty easily coming out of it. I had to completely rewrite what I was going to do. So what it ended up being is half my army had to drop their firepower into these Brockers in order to try and get them to drop their objective. I managed to succeed, but I couldn't claim it this turn because I even had to put the Sky Razors fire into there. The plan had been for the Sky Razors to claim that objective. On the other side, everything poured its fire into these Hammer Fist drop troopers, and I managed to get them down to 1 model in the unit. I then glide up with my Kyra. The Prime hops out and grabs 1 objectives, and the Wardens are about to hop out, and I've got a decision. Do I hop them out, put power diverters on them in order to give them plus AP, and drill this single lone Hammer Fist with 18 knockback shots, AP1, seismic to knock down the heavy armor a bit? That should hopefully kill it. Or do I teleport out, go in there hitting on 4s because I won't be hindered in the charge, but I will cop a line of sightless charge, going in with only 12 attacks, no AP, but still seismics, like should be able to get through the heavy armor, maybe? The advantage to charging in is if I win the fight, kill this 1 trooper, then that means I claim the objective for free and I'm getting the points this turn. Decisions. Which way do you reckon I went?
You went the ladder and it didn't work.
You are absolutely correct.
Of course.
Because of course you go in and go.
Yeah.
Anyway.
One wound.
One wound is all that was needed, and it did not happen. So anyway, the wardens went in, whiffed. It pushed the Hammer Fist Drop Trooper, because it ended up being a drawn fight. I've got 4 shields on me. There's no way you can win that fight. But it pushes him back 3 inches closer to his lines and pushes me 3 inches further back. I can't be pinned, but I can be very annoyed, and I was. Unfortunately, it also knocks that lone Hammer Fist into range of the Forge Guard Huskarl's regen bubble. And so suddenly it's 2 Hammer Fist Drop Troopers there now.
And he's no longer last man standing, so
and he's no longer last man standing, so there's no longer -2 on the nerve check, which there would have been before, and he's now 3 inches closer to his... I spent the rest of the game trying to winkle that unit. It ended up getting to 3 Hammer Fists at the end of turn 2, so it just kept regenerating back. I eventually managed to go in there, and sanity prevailed the second time. The wardens stepped in and dropped their shields and drilled that Hammer Fist unit. They dropped it. My warden managed to leg it with an uncontested objective, and I did manage to get the right-hand one. I did get the game in the end with the left-hand and the right-hand objective, and just had to keep Mark playing pickup as I knocked down each unit that went to pick up the central objective. But it's those turning point decisions which change how the game played. And Mark played it very, very well. I mean, forcing me to chase down Forge Fathers and have to go through their durability just in order to score. He played it very, very well.
So the last one was Lockdown.
So my round 3 opponent was Will from Melbourne. He flew up just for this one-day event, which is so cool. I did meet Will at Clash of Protocols. Didn't get much of a chance to talk to him and didn't get to play him. So it was awesome to be able to get to face him at this event and, meet him and chat to him properly. So he was playing Marauders, and the scariest things in his list for me were the 2 weapons teams with missile launchers, channeling my inner Mike. They terrified me, particularly with my, armor 5.
Yeah.
And they can steady aim to get rid of one of the negatives. Like I was really feeling like that was going to be a problem. And the 2 melee stunt bots, since I don't have great anti-tank in this list and I don't have many assault units, so they were quite scary.
Yeah.
As well as, likewise the unit of grunt bots, 4 grunt bots. I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with them? I was actually hoping to get some toxic shots on them and get some free wounds out of it. But no, I couldn't hit them with toxic, no matter how hard I tried. So the table layout, this one, I had the one with the hill in the middle that you played on.
Oh, yeah.
There's the hill in the middle of the table, and then most of the taller terrain is kind of near the deployment zones. So really, the central, area of the board, besides that hill, is quite open. With the hill, some things can see over it still, so it wasn't, a huge detriment for me in particular. I deployed in 2 clear battle groups. Sometimes I am mentally doing a split force 2 battle group thing, but I'm trying not to make it look like that's what I'm doing. So they kind of meld in together a little bit, even though I'm intending things to go. This one I had clearly...
It's lockdown, right?
A big group over there and a big group over there. And I had one tunneler right in the middle because I'm like, I need to be able to send something somewhere if I need to support one side or the other.
Can I quickly just jump in?
Yeah.
So having the tunneler in the center in order to rapidly redeploy rather than going subterranean and coming up where it's needed?
Yeah, I don't like missing turn 1. I think for something like, Night Terrors, where you might want them to have the utility of coming up anywhere and being a problem for the opponent, fair enough. But for me, I'm like, I need those shields and I need those shots on turn 1.
Yeah, okay.
So that's why they're always on the table. They were just in range of a few things to provide the shields, but sort of still central to go either way as needs to be. With those 2 battle groups, my intent was to try and hold both of them turn 1. And then from there, I picked a side. It was my right. And I thought, I'm going to hold that one all game. And I'm going to try and hold the other one for a turn or 2 and then let it go. And, either try and tie up his forces over there or bring things across, or maybe they'll all be dead. Who knows? Turns out, ironically, it went the opposite way. And the side I wanted to hold all game, I couldn't quite. And the other one that I didn't think I would be able to, I ended up holding all game. So the biggest concerns on his list, obviously, like I said, with the weapons teams and the stunt bots. Turn 1, I managed to kill 1 base of each of the 2 weapons teams. One with moving the Night Terrors, which I deployed on the field, forward to get just the tiniest sliver of vision around the hill, and it burns, doesn't care. And I took out a base over there. And then on the other side, I put Malignity in a building to get vision and height over the intervening terrain, and managed to take a base off of those of the ones on the other side. So I was a lot more comfortable not having to deal with all of those missile launches for the rest of the game, and I pretty much ignored them after that. Although I did end up charging one late in the game and taking that final base off. Really from there, it was just kind of a meat grinder. We both just kept throwing units forward and shooting or charging and killing things, trying to claim those objectives. It was quite a tight and coy game. Really, like, he had more melee sort of viable stuff. I sort of had a little bit more anti-shooting to keep things weathering a bit in the, as we're closing fire. But really, I was looking at going, is he just going to start smashing me off points and killing my units? But just, I don't know, through some combination of luck and strategy, I guess, I managed to keep enough units alive long enough to keep scoring. So it did end up with a victory for me, but really, like, the result was not indicative of how, tight the game was. I think Will knows his army really well. He piloted it very well. I still can't tell you exactly how I managed to pull out the victory, and certainly I think a bit of a bigger score gap than I would have anticipated looking at the table on turn 2. Turn 2, I'm still thinking there's a chance I'm losing this. Such a good game. My only guess is that somehow my strategy managed to pay off and I got lucky where I needed to get lucky, and that's how I got the win. So props to Will, great opponent, and that was my third game.
I played Will in Clash. He's an excellent opponent.
Yes.
So my final opponent was Jason and his Marauders. Now, I think I play more games of any system against Jason than any other opponent. Like we played Star Wars Legion against each other, Drop Fleet Commander, Drop Zone Commander, Firefight, Dreadball.
Kings of War, I've seen you play Kings of War against each other, you play it all. Enough for me make the quip to say, didn't you guys need to know each other?
Yeah, so Jason and I are very familiar with how we each play. I will say, for this game, all through it, Jason had atrocious dice. I mean, and that's also one of the things that Jason is also synonymous with as well, is that when it matters, he'll roll poorly. And that was just kind of stretched across the entire game this time.
I should have mentioned as well, with my game against Stu. I completely forgot until you mentioned that. My dice were hot. His were total rubbish. Like that probably played a really big part in the victory. Yeah, the other games were fine. Dice felt fine, but my first game was just atrocious with dice.
For Jason, he didn't have a lucky game this one, but I also feel it was in some ways kind of decided in deployment. So if we go back to our turn 0 episode where we talk about reading the board and recon roll, so Jason had won the recon roll and he had surrendered initiative to me so that I could pick the deployment zone. The difference in recon rolls wasn't terribly high. He wanted to see how I deployed first. When I had a look at the table, based on where the objectives were, I noted that on this side of the table, the left-hand flank had a bunch of blocking terrain, height 3, which would be funneling anyone coming from the other side through a pretty severe bottleneck in order to get to that objective. On the other side, there were 2 buildings and a bit of cover. I was like, well, in that case, I'm going to take this side and I'm going to force Jason through this bottleneck. And it wasn't pretty because all the blocking terrain over here is height 3. So I put my Chroma and my Spectra, both height 4. So anything which is queuing up to get through this bottleneck is being shot at by some pretty fierce shooting. And anything trying to get through is just whittled down by Ciphers and Sky Razors. All the while the Overseers just pumping the shields on everything over there. It was a bit of a butcher shop. Over on the other flank, Luke, you would be so proud. Those 2 buildings. So Jason was trying out the new salvage engineers. He had planned on making them his last activation in round 1 so that they could sweep in on the objective, unleash a bunch of thermobaric grenades on me, and then claim the objective. But my wardens inside the Kyra glided on up their 12, hopped out of the Kyra and immediately walked into the building, and suddenly that mule that they're hiding in is not hiding at all. Dropped their shields by 1 for power diverters, and suddenly it's 18 shots on 4s with AP1 and Seismic, so AP2 against a mule. That mule did not live. And then they acted early in the next turn, and the Brawlers, who also thought they were hiding behind that building, also got drilled by 18 AP1 shots, and there were 2 less. If we're talking MVPs for the game, it was those Wardens who just utterly cleared that flank for me. They took a few casualties when the Scrappers started lobbing charges into the buildings, and that's fine. It ended up being that those Wardens were my only casualty for the game. but they took that entire flank for me. It ended up being a tabling for Jason. He just had a single mule left on the board, and I'd claimed both objectives for all 5 turns.
Well, that's not a tabling, and the mule's a mule.
Well, there we go. Not a tabling,
Not a
man.
tabling. Yeah, Jason's my number one firefight opponent as well, and we play Kings of War quite often as well. Always a great game. I'm sure it was a laugh, even though, his dice...
Oh, he was...
But that's par for the course with Jason as well. His dice are not...
And despite it being a very rough game for him, incredibly stoic, took it all in good grace. Yeah, always an excellent opponent.
Yeah. The whole day was played in fantastic spirits for all players as far as I was concerned. Sometimes got people a little bit angry with themselves, but not with their opponents. That everybody seemed to be having fun and laughing, and the whole spirit from all 12 players was fantastic to see.
Is there anything you'd change for a future event, Mike?
I would change scenarios, but only because I like to rotate them around. Otherwise, not really. I thought the tables and the table spacing was fine. The hall was a little bit noisy, but there was a number of people who were in that hall. Otherwise...
Yes, I was in the hall.
Some of them were us, Mike.
yes. There was quite a number of people, but I thought the venue was fine. It's the second year I've been there. This is the first year I did firefight there, though. Last year I ran Kings of War.
What'd you do for your next event?
So as I mentioned before, the next event we should be able to get to 1,500 points at least. I have a bit more time, although it may be an earlier start in the morning, but it is a lot more local to Brisbane for people to be able to get to. That's the main part of looking at it. I want to try to build it out a bit more to see how those extra points will work in the future, particularly with the more elite armies, because they do appear to be struggling a little bit at the moment. Some of the players playing those are relatively new to firefight, and they seem to be getting their feet well and truly into the games. And 1,500 points, hopefully I would go to 17, 15. The other one, the observation I will make, which I think is, I did notice that a lot of people were spending an awful lot of time in what I would consider the deployment. I did notice one game basically around about half an hour, and it was just starting to finish deployment, which is, when you work it out, that's 25% of your time you just spent in deployment alone. So I would caution a lot of people to make sure that they're looking to reduce the amount of time that they're spending in deployment. There was quite often a lot of games were still on the first turn 1 hour into 50% of your time for the game was being spent on the first turn, which of course includes deployment, but it does leave you a lot of time to get through to the end. So I think with a lot of people saying that they're only getting to turn 3, maybe turn 4, may have to have a look at the deployment section and how long they're spending doing that. So with keeping that in mind is that I am going to be looking at introducing clocks and trialing clocks in the next game to give people 75 minutes each, which would include deployment, and for them to see how that goes. And hopefully it will speed people up and get people to go closer to playing 5 turns more often.
I'd be keen to try out clocks. I mean, it's not quite built for it in the same way that Kings is, right? But I'm sure we know when it is that we're doing stuff and we can tap off. I'm sure that's fine. I think a lot of time is being spent in what we think of as turn 0 with all the things from the recon roll through to first activation. I think some people don't necessarily think of that time as coming out of their tournament time. But of course, as soon as we've got table pairings, your clock's on, right? I think people may not necessarily be thinking that their time has started now.
Yes, that could pretty much be part of it too. Yeah, I get the comment about more of the alternating activations, but they are called chess clocks, and chess is an alternating activation game.
That's fair. That's fair.
Spot on.
As long as you remember to dink it, like a lot of opponents that I play that don't play as many tournaments forget to hit the clock at the end.
Yeah, and look, it's just something to trial to see if we can keep people to have a look at it.
Yeah, I'd be keen to try them with a softer approach to timing out, at least for the first event. So I don't know what that would look like, but it's more about reminding people that they are on a time limit and to play a bit quicker to be fair on their opponent. Some armies obviously score later, and they need to have a fair chance to score. Otherwise, there's no point taking those armies. I don't think it's unreasonable in this game to be starting turn 2 around the hour mark. I would certainly want to be starting it sooner, but when you think about how the game goes, I think deployment takes a lot longer in Firefight than something like Kings of War, because you're having to think about your whole deployment at once. Yeah. Whereas in Kings of War, you can be thinking about your next unit while they're putting one down. So you have a bit of thinking room not on your clock. The second person to deploy gets a bit of a benefit on the clock in firefight because they can be looking at what's going down over the table and thinking about what they want to do while that's happening. And then turn 1 always takes the most time because it's that with the movement speeds and the 18-inch shooting as being quite standard, it's much more of a standoff and you're waiting to see what they do and no one wants to be the first one to come forward and couple that fire. It's a lot more coy and a lot more standoffish in turn 1. I tend to find turn 1 takes a lot longer, like significantly longer to play out than any other turn. So combine deployment and turn 1, that is going to take up a lot of the time, but hopefully then you're then getting into the motions and playing quickly enough that turns 2 through 5 can get done in that time limit.
Absolutely. As well as all the thing with all these games where as units get removed, you then don't need to activate them and turns speed up that way, right?
Fewer dice to roll, fewer things to do, fewer commanders giving command points for orders and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just generally thinking that generally each one halves. So if you're looking at 1 hour for turn 1, half an hour for turn 2, then you're looking at 15 minutes potentially for turn 3, but you're running out of time for turn 4. And turn 5 at that point. So I'm hoping to squeak out to get to the point where if we shorten turn 1 a little bit, then we get be able to fit in a turn 5.
Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right for turn 1 as well. And that you're often thinking like, well, I'm just going to do this activation, which I don't particularly care about because I need to run out their activations. I want to activate with these ones last, and I want to do them after they've done whatever this is.
I love activating my reserves. He kind of goes, yep.
Okay, so hopefully everybody found that insightful and hopefully picked out a few bits and pieces on what's Sam and Luke in particular, the way they design their lists and the way that they play their games and the units that they have. If you are thinking of doing a TO, I'm more than happy for you to hit me up via Facebook if you wish to have a conversation, maybe the thoughts of the reason why I particularly look at choosing those particular scenarios. And a few other things that I normally do before an event, which I didn't really mention, but normally I like to throw out a few facts out there to try and drill out a bit of excitement in before the actual event going through. We'll move into our usual Overwatch on what we are kind of looking forward to in the next month. Sam?
Well, my Overwatch last month was, I'm so excited about these salvage engineers, I'm hoping we get new units. And boom, I got 4 new Asterian units. So with that in mind, I'm going to wish for the same thing again. I'm going to wish for more new units, but I'm not expecting it to be realized this time.
So honestly, I have so many boxes of grey plastic for firefight still kicking around in my shed gathering dust. Not through want, but through time and a combination of excitement about, I'm excited about the armies I've already built. What do I do next? I'm not quite sure. I'm waiting to see if there's any new units or vault releases or anything like that that inspires me to start one of these armies that I've got sitting there in the queue ready to go.
As well as the secret project.
That is part of my grey pile of shame, but also it's not even what I would have considered as one of my armies in the queue. It's another one, yeah.
I've never wanted to know anything more.
For me, I just said I've got another tournament coming up in a few more weeks, beginning of May coming in. So we're doing that. As mentioned, I want to try to get within the next 7 days my Night Stalkers for Firefight completed, painted and based, and start being able to play those. I've played one game, but with only half the army painted, which went pretty well. I was pretty happy with it, very surprised at how some of the units performed. I'm hearing that some other people are starting to look at running a firefight tournaments in the country, which excites me no end because I'll hopefully be able to play for once to go through. I don't play very often, but I don't complain about it because I love watching other people playing and I love to see people having fun playing the games. And if that takes me to organise it for everybody else to do that, I'm fine with that.
We love what you do, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
So that brings us to the end of this episode. So crush your enemies, drive them before you, and unleash controlled fire.
Hear the tales, fierce and deep. Victors roar defeated. We blaze away. We don't hold back. Control fire, ready to attack.